Good morning and welcome. This morning I thought it made a lot of sense to start with probably the biggest woke train wreck of last week, which we all know was the Jaguar video for their rebrand, which was pretty funny. But before we play the really awful video, let's play what Jaguar used to be from the Super Bowl.
Have you ever noticed how in Hollywood movies all the villains are played by Brits?
Maybe we just sound right. Thank you, Mary.
Focus. More precise.
We're always one step ahead.
With a certain style. An eye for detail. And we'll assess my power. Stiff upper lip is key.
You drive Jaguars. Oh, yes. It's good to be back.
So I'm not sure what to think about that. I think it's pretty much been a train wreck for their brand, from what I understand. But anyway, let's get on to it since it's pretty much obliterated what was Jaguar. I know Jag wasn't doing very well, but I think that was the death note, from what I understand. Anyway, such is life. Here we go. We want to share this screen. Here we go. Here we go.
Thanks coming on the general manager of the Fred Beats Kia in Lanark. We just wanted to take a minute to talk about Larry Feldman, Career Changers USA. Larry and I have been working together for about the last 12 years now, and anything I've ever needed as far as recruiting, training, Larry's been right there. Larry's got me salespeople, he's got me managers, he's got me technicians even through the toughest times in the industry, and he is just the kind of guy who's going to tell you exactly what's on his mind. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. But Larry also has the expertise to back it up. When he was in the dealership world, he was a top performer. And that's really important to my staff, especially as it pertains to training. A lot of people can come in and teach out of a textbook, but Larry has real world experience dealing with customers, dealing with situations in dealerships that we go through on a daily basis and try to train on. But Larry's been through it, so he can really empathize with the people and tell you what's worked for him and maybe what way not to go. Larry is just always at a 10. I mean, his energy level is always up there. And I think people, they just love that and they feed off of it. He's not faking it. He is genuinely excited to come in and help you. He's excited to come in and help grow your business. And he's one of those people who just really enjoys seeing dealers succeed and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Life is about connection. Having a support system to lean on. And roads to endless possibility. At every turn, guiding the way, we are building the connections that move you.
So what would your dealership feel like if your entire sales staff was literally on fire, your sales and service staff? They were nonstop all over social media, completely dominating your marketplace. They could do it in 30 days or less and then continue their education to do it for an entire 6 months or a year. You literally would completely take over the entire marketplace and no one would be able to compete with you. And that's what we can do for you. So when you're walking around your community, whether you're at local restaurants or you're going to the gym, you don't want to be bothered? Fine, you won't be bothered. But a lot of people will walk up to you and say, oh my God, I love your social media. Your staff is amazing. We love what you're doing in the community. We want to come buy a car from you. We want to get an oil change at your dealership. Your community is absolutely going to love you. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. You could be on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all social media platforms. You will literally be all over the place. And not only will you have ads running, but your own staff is going to be promoting your brand and promoting themselves within the dealership and within the business. So it's like running an ad times 100-fold because your entire staff is participating in the process. I've traveled all over North America. I've trained Toyota. I've trained Nissan. I've been to driving sales. I've been to Women in Auto. I get hired as a speaker for conferences at universities all over the country. And I can help change the trajectory of your dealership right now.
Good morning and welcome. I was actually going to play that. I don't know, Larry, if you remember that, but there was a situation, I think it was last year, a couple of years ago, where there's two Toyota salesmen who got in a fight in the showroom with a customer, which I thought was pretty freaking funny. Not in a good way, but funny, I guess you could say. But it was kind of interesting because, you know, you generally don't see that at car dealers on a comment. I mean, I know there's skating and that kind of stuff. But the one that I think always struck me from years and years of selling cars, and I guess really it came to a head initially when I first got in the car business. I had the illusion or delusion that selling a car and delivering a car could be perfection. Like you could deliver that car and it would just be perfect, front to back. And I guess the question I have for you this morning is, what's the craziest story in your career? I mean, you've been at it a while. What do you think?
Man, have I seen a lot of crazy stories here. Yeah, the craziest. I'm trying to give this some deep thought because, as you know, crazy is my territory. I think I've seen just about every possible scenario, every strange situation. You know, people that hit the lottery, unusual arrangements for how they would finance. Right, every car guy knows the classic. He doesn't have any credit. You know, I don't have the license. All right, I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you the crazy story after.
Okay.
I get a guy that comes in, unbelievably nice gentleman, who happened to be blind.
Okay.
I treated him with respect. I made a fair deal. He was with his daughter. And I sold him a car. Nothing untoward there, nothing crazy yet. And I get a call from him, super nice gentleman. And he says, Larry, you know, kids are kids. I said, okay, I'll go with that. Kids are kids. He says, my daughter had a little minor fender bender. No big deal. I'm sure you can help. I said, well, of course I can. We have a body shop. You're you know, no problem. You're insured properly. About 8 minutes later, the car rolls in on a flatbed. It looked like it get hit by a train and fell off a cliff. Now, I'm not making this up. I get it fixed. I send it back to him. I'm not making this up, Ian. 2 months later, I get a call. You know, it's just so funny how kids are kids, Larry. This wreck was worse than the last wreck. But wait, while this is going on, the dealership gets a call from General Motors. This is before Ally was handling paper, GMAC.
Yeah.
And they called me into the office and they said, are you aware that this gentleman was blind? And of course, since my brain doesn't function like most normal people, instead of saying, of course I was, his daughter was with him, I replied, Really, I just thought he was a bad driver. That's a true story.
Well, I have a couple of stories on that. Let's just use accidents as the first theme today. So I go out on the lot, and this woman pulls in her car, and there's damage on every single panel of this car. And she comes in, she goes, "Oh, do you guys have a body shop?" I said, "No, you should just start again with a fresh canvas." But the one that was really crazy from an accident point of view was this gentleman and his wife and his kids pull in this, I think it was a Honda Civic or a Honda Accord. Damage on every panel. The sunroof is shattered. There's a garbage bag with tape. And he comes in to buy a new vehicle. And I said, "So are you keeping that or are you trading it in?" And he goes, "No, I'm going to keep it." And I'm like, "Really?" That's an interesting choice. But the craziest one I ever saw from an accident point of view, and this was kind of a little bit nuts. I'm walking down the street where I used to live in Vancouver. And this lady's driving a car. And you know how the front quarter panel of a car, when you get in an accident, sometimes it's a little damaged, right? Well, this lady had hit something with this car. And there was a piece of serrated metal about 3 feet off the corner of the car like a sword. And she was driving.
No, Ian, you're getting confused. That was when they shot Mad Max up in Canada. That was the footage you were thinking.
I don't know. The cop pulled her over, and I'm like, "What the hell were you thinking there?" But you were talking about a blind person. I did have two scenarios in a car purchase. One, I sold it to a deaf couple, which I learned a bunch from doing that. And the other one, I tried to sell a car to a guy who unfortunately was on dialysis. And even with crazy follow-up, unfortunately died before he could buy the car, which was kind of interesting. You really wanted to buy it. But the one that was interesting from the deaf couple also comes back to accidents. So when you're negotiating with a deaf couple, you spend a lot of time with pencil and paper. You put stuff down, you send it to them, they put stuff down, you send it to you, this, that, and the other thing. And what I didn't know, at least where I worked selling cars, was not only did you have to do that, when they're in the business office, you had to, as a dealer, pay for a sign language interpreter out of your front-end profit so that they were real crystal clear on what it is they were buying or not buying. So ended up going through that whole process. It took like 3 hours to do the deal because there was a lot of paperwork going back and forth and notes and moving back and forth. And then they came back about a week after they delivered the car. And since they were deaf, they, rightly or wrongly, they had hit something and they said, "Oh, I think this damage was on the car when you delivered it." And I said, "No, it's not. It's not the damage was on the car. You just didn't hear it when you hit the other car."
Ian, have you noticed through your many years involved with dealerships that the witness protection program would be best served in cleanup shops and body shops? Because it's amazing how a car went into detail without damage, came out with it, and nobody saw anything. No witnesses whatsoever. It's like it didn't exist.
Well, it's funny. A buddy of mine actually owns a large group of body shops. They have locations in Canada. They have also locations in California. And I was talking about the biggest challenges he has in the business. Obviously, one of them is dealing with insurance companies, but the other one is just getting qualified candidates who aren't doing it for the chemicals.
Yeah.
I can't quite get it done, not because I couldn't do it, but because I'm inhaling too much paint fumes. So that was kind of funny. But the one that was really crazy in the service side of the house that I worked for a company called Dealer Effects years ago and doing some work with a Nissan store, and it had two situations. One, we're doing the standard walk around in service, teaching the guy how to use a tablet and do that. And as we're going around the car, he says, "Oh, there's a bullet hole here. Should I note that?" And I was like, "What are you shooting cars out back?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, you might want to note that." But the other crazy thing, and this was a dealer in Chicago, the other crazy thing was I'm talking to this technician. He's a Nissan GTR technician. So that's their fancy four-wheel drive, whatever that thing is, Gorilla or Monster, or, I don't know, Godzilla or whatever they call it. So this guy bought a GTR and paid, I don't know, 120 grand for this car way back. And he was a doctor. So what he'd done, instead of buying the proper performance parts for the car, he bought them aftermarket. So I'm talking to a technician, and he's trying to modify this car in the dealership service bay. And he goes, yeah, I can put all these parts on the car, but the air conditioning ain't gonna work because the tolerances weren't quite what they needed to be. And it really reminded me of a situation that I had. I was working with a General Motors store, and the service manager was a buddy of mine. So they'd had this car in service, and they'd accidentally punctured one of the tires, 4-wheel drive pickup or something. So he says, "Okay, well, it's our bad. We'll replace the 2 front tires." And the customer's like, "No, you got to replace all the tires." And he's like, "Well, I don't think that's even reasonable, dude. Like 1 tire, okay, match set, fine, but all 4." He says, "I'm never going to come here again." He's like, "Okay." But the one that was really funny is years later, I saw him. He was working at a Lexus store. And if you're not familiar with Kelowna, BC, it's kind of a winery retirement community. So now he's working for Lexus. So when he was working for General Motors, he was always pulling his hair out because people were just a disaster and a nightmare. But then I went to see him years later. He was working at a Lexus store. He was the most mellow guy I've ever seen. He was like, "Yeah, people come in, they don't complain about what it costs. They give them the keys, we give them a loaner, and they come back when it's done. There's no hassle. Nobody complains about anything." So that was really, really funny. Now we know you talk a lot about customer experience, and I talk a lot about it. And we've talked about it probably now for 5 years. What do you think the biggest skill is when you're dealing with one of these crazy customers? Like I have another one with a minivan purchase, which was crazy. But what's the best skill that a salesperson, a manager, a dealer can learn when they're confronted with one of these crazy scenarios that maybe doesn't make sense? Like, how do they handle that? How do they handle the crazy, right?
I think you need perspective. I mean, generally when we talk about how to sell and really how to live your life, we want to be better listeners and we want to be better at empathizing. But I think you have to suspend disbelief when you deal with certain customers because sometimes their logic is so circular, and they're not into to win lose. They're into I win you die. So rather than one of my favorite Mark Twain quotes is never argue with stupid people. They'll drag you down to your level and beat you with experience. If you're screaming and hollering back at somebody who's screaming and hollering at you, I think the only remedy is to acknowledge, I understand, I feel you, you're right, even if they're wrong. And what can I do to solve this?
Yeah.
Because I think you'll find, and you found, unfortunately, as we all have, that some people just enjoy being angry and upset. That's what fires off their endorphins, okay? So it's almost like they don't want to stop being angry.
Right.
So
right.
I think the only thing you can do, of course, as always, when people are angry, is let it get all the anger out. Try not to interrupt them. When they've exhausted, that energy, then it's time to say, you know what? I'd really be upset if that happened to me too. What do you think would possibly please you? Let me see what I can do to help. Obviously, you don't want a blanket promise. It's as bad as when somebody brings out a number of $40,000 car and the guy says, "How about 15,000?" You say, "I'll see what I can do," as opposed to, "Wow, that really seems like a really low offer. May I ask how you arrived?" Like everything else, we've got to qualify things, we've got to quantify things, but mostly, look, Ian, you and I tend to fall on the same side politically. So let's remove the politics from it.
Okay.
But in the last few elections, half the country has been completely out of their mind either way.
Yeah.
Deliriously happy or I'm jumping off the bridge. And I think we'll all agree that we're in a situation in the world where we're way too sensitive. We get way too upset over things that are out of our control or really aren't as bad as we think they are, right? Hey, how many times have I said on your show, when somebody's having a bad day and they're wearing a fancy suit and they got a nice watch on, I tell them, go to a pediatric cancer ward and tell me how bad your day is. So when we look at now listen, if you get seriously injured, that's terrible. Somebody passed away, God, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But most of the things that people get crazy over aren't really worth getting crazy over. It's more important to take a step back and a deep breath, but you can't expect the angry person to do that. So you have to be the only person, that can do that. And listen, all the people we deal with can, at times, myself and you included, can be illogical. That's why I think my secret weapon, when I tell you, you're going to say that ain't no secret, Larry, is sense of humor. It's hard for people to strangle you or want to punch you if you're smiling. I remember being at the dealership. It was the last day of the month, and I was trying to sell my 40th car.
Yep.
Now, at a dealership that only averaged 150 cars a month and had 12 other salespeople, 40 was not that achievable, often not even for me.
Yeah.
And I went to my finance guy, who was really himself a little bit mentally unstable. And he looked at the application. Because of the nature of the area where I was working, there were a lot of very nice people with very poor credit scores. And he looked at the application, threw it at me, and said, "Don't even come to me with this. The guy doesn't even pay his child support." And I looked at him off the top of my head and said, "Well, maybe the kids are up." So if the bottom line is, I wound up making it.
Yeah.
If we look at things and realize that in 100 years we're all going to be dead, and none of this is going to matter, okay?
Yeah.
Just give ourselves a little perspective, and hopefully we can give our customers a little bit of perspective. Because again, if you step back, everybody I've ever met, including the guy I see in the mirror, we can be unreasonable, we can be outright ridiculous, and think about a lot of the things that you thought and that mattered to you and were important 2 years ago, 10 years ago, that you might have a completely different opinion.
Yeah.
So, in a business that we're dealing with, where honesty is a challenge, right? The customer comes in and lies about the credit score. They may lie about what they own in their car. They may lie about that it's never in an accident. And I'm not saying that anybody's a model, of honesty or dishonesty, but if we can just take a step back and try to build some kind of trust. And I'm not talking about phony trust. I'm talking about when you're smart enough to realize the person in front of you is paying your salary. The owner doesn't pay you because you're handsome or beautiful. They pay you when you produce.
Yeah.
So inevitably, your customer is the person. So if we tend to look at people and realize what they bring to the table, I think some good things can happen. You agree?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the thing that I guess 10 years of being in the trenches in automotive and 14 years working with dealers in various ways has taught me is, number one, don't panic. I mean, I don't know if that, I think it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. First thing, don't panic, no matter what happens, because you never know what's going to happen in auto. That's what makes it so interesting. But the other thing that really, I think I learned after 10 years, maybe it took me a little bit less than that, the amount of crazy customers seems like a lot, but the vast majority can be reasoned with. Now, occasionally you run into some people who are missing a few screws, and I ran into numbers.
Wait a minute, Ian. They determined that 2 out of 3 people may have some kind of mental health issue.
Yeah.
So look around if you're with 2 other people, look around. If they see normal, maybe it's time for you to look in the mirror, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had this lady, and this was kind of funny. So she came in late night. My manager always used to go crazy when someone would come in right before close. It's like, oh, that's not going to be a deal, and this and that, and you're wasting my time. So she came in. I happened to be working at a Honda dealer, and the cheapest car they made was a Honda Fit. And we had one in the showroom, and we tinted the glass on the back, and it was a nice car. She wanted to drive that one. It was blue or something. So we drove that one, took it out of the showroom, drove the car. Came back. She's like, well, I don't want the tinted glass that's on the back of the car. And I said, well, these are made in the assembly line. We have another one without the tinted glass. Like, it's no problem. She's like, well, I'm attached to this one. I'm like, okay, well, it's on the car. Like, we could take it off there, but it's not like there's a huge amount of money in these things. Like, this is like the base, basic car. And so she goes, well, I don't think the flow's right. And I said, well, what? What the hell does that mean? And she's like, I'm really attached to this car. So I went over to my manager. I'm like, I really, I'm not quite sure what to do. So then I'm talking to this lady. I'm going, oh, she's like, I always buy used cars, and I usually buy them only when the last one dies, and I never bought a new car, so I want it to be right, and this and that. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. They make it in an assembly line. No problem. We got another blue one in storage. We can bring it over here, clean it up, and be the same thing. She goes, oh, no, it's this one. And I'm like, okay, well, the math ain't going to work. So the craziest thing about it, Larry, wasn't that. That was crazy. We didn't end up doing a deal for whatever reason. The crazier thing was this woman had won the lottery a couple years before and was worried about like a $200-300 charge on a cheap car that was new. And I'm like, what's going on? And I had another lottery one that was crazy. I'm working at a dealership, General Motors store, I believe it was. And this guy's daughter, who was in her 20s, had won $50 million. So he's at a General Motors store talking to all the salesmen on the floor in this small town, saying, hey, my 20-year-old daughter just won $50 million. And I took him aside. I said, dude, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but they probably know who this lady is. And I'm not saying they're going to abuse her. I don't know, but it's likely. So you might want to just like keep it under the carpet. I was like, wow. But the craziest one.
The comforting news is it wasn't the salespeople. I think that the record's pretty clear. When the lottery winners win, they get picked clean by their relatives.
Oh, yeah.
By long lost cousins. The amount of people that find out that be careful about what you want because you just might get it. It's a pretty large percentage of people that were doing okay. They weren't great. And now they're so hopelessly marooned in bankruptcy or debt because they weren't equipped to handle a large amount of money. And that could be more dangerous than having less money and trying to manage a small budget.
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, I remember I did a minivan test drive many years ago, and I almost died on the test drive. The lady hit the minivan into an F-350 truck and basically wiped out this minivan. And after I got out of the car and got back to the dealership, because they had to drive back, the police showed up or whatever, fire ambulance. She wants to negotiate with me on the price of this car. And I'm like, you just wiped out this $50,000 truck. And now you want to buy one. That's cool. I think I'm going to go home now. I think I'm going to take this opportunity to, like, I don't know, enjoy the rest of my day. Like, I really don't want to be doing this anymore today. I think
you were banking on people being rational.
Oh, yeah.
I'll never forget. I'm the GM of my store at this point.
Yep.
Down on the floor.
Yep.
And I would come over and I would shake everybody's hand and talk to everybody. You know, EMI being was in my DNA before they started talking about it.
Yeah.
I like getting involved. I like talking to people. And I went over to this lady and I thanked her because it looked like she was in the process of possibly purchasing the car.
Yep.
And she said, I want to commend you on your salesperson. He's really a good person. I said, well, it's so rewarding to hear that. And you seem really nice. So this is a win-win. And I'm thrilled. May I ask what it is you're thinking of purchasing today? Well, she said, this Hyundai, I love it. I said, great. Are we going to be able to earn your business today? And she says, well, I got to tell you, and I won't mention the name of the dealer. It's such a beautiful thing to be at a place where the owner comes over and the salespeople are so nice because I was at this other place and it was horrible. It was just maybe the worst buying experience I've ever had in my life.
Yep.
And it's so great to be with nice people. I said, gosh, you're really making my morning. So we can earn your business. She says, well, no, I have to go back to them to see if they'll beat me. I mean, they've gotten into the habit of taping with permission in finance offices, so everybody is above board as to exactly what was offered and what isn't. But if you have permission to tape everybody, and what comes out of their mouth, it would just blow your mind because the lack of logic, like I said, the circular logic, the things that just don't make any possible sense to anybody. Yeah. Listen, this is why this business is very rewarding, and it's not for everybody because it's certainly not easy.
Yeah, like I had this lady and her son come in, and she wanted to buy, I think, an Accord. I don't know. And she was telling me about her experience at another dealership. And I said, what happened? She goes, well, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, my husband, who was an Asian man, was, killed in a car accident. So I'm at this dealership with my son. I need a new car. And, I'm out going to the washroom. So the salesman asked my son, do I have permission and the ability to buy a car when I'm in the washroom? And then I come back and my son's like, Mom, like, what's the deal with this guy? And she's like, I'm out of here. So I was talking to her and I'm like, so really you came there with your son and you're not the check writer. She says, I was, but I sat there and I said, what is this a common experience for you? She goes, no, but it was just so blatant. And I was like, wow.
It's because, Ian, it's because so many car salespeople don't realize that Bruce Springsteen is a liar. He calls himself the boss. Mrs. Springsteen is the boss.
Exactly.
Women influence 80% of the buying decisions. They buy 60% of the cars. And most women cannot stand the way they're treated in car dealerships. And instead of us immediately reacting to that, it's just a reflexive bad behavior. So while that story's terrible, it doesn't shock.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many different things, so many different dealers, whether it be in Las Vegas or New York or different areas. But when you're looking at it from a point of view of take a step back, see what the scenario is, figure out what's wrong and what could be right. I mean, obviously, you got to take out that percentage of people that are missing a few screws that maybe you can't figure that out. And it's actually funny that you brought that up because my dad was a medical doctor. And before he became a medical doctor, he was a car salesman. And then he passed away years later, and I was at his wake, and some of the students he taught medicine to back in college said to me, they said, your dad left Canada, he moved to the US. We had all these patient files that we inherited from when he was a doctor here. And there'd be a note on it saying, this person might have some issues. And then we go to the customer, the patient would come in, and he said they were freaking lunatics. And he said, how did your dad deal with that? I said, well, he probably had 10 years of auto experience, and he was really good at dealing with people. And that's what you have to do to be in the car business. And I think even though car salesmen get a bad name, they're very good at a lot of things. And one of those things is what I call MacGyvering stuff, but also dealing with situations where you really kind of feel more like a marriage counselor in some cases, where you got a husband and wife, you got kids involved, you got multi-generational.
That's why we love hiring bartenders.
Oh yeah,
because they have to be marriage counselors, sports experts, and sex therapists, and every other darn thing.
Yeah, I remember a guy coming in. He was driving one of those Mercedes hardtop convertible, the 2-seater cars, SL or whatever it was, and he just knocked his wife up, so he needed a minivan. And I don't know what those cars were. I don't know, 150 grand or something. But just to your point, he spent about 20 minutes to a half an hour arguing about the trade-in value for this car that was no longer going to fit his needs. And I'm sitting there going, okay, it was fine for 2 people, but now you have a third person involved, soon to be here, and you're worried about how much money you lost on this car that clearly wasn't, a rational purchase at the time. But the one that was really crazy, and I guess it really kind of shocked me. I was working at a Chrysler store for an event, and a guy came in. He had a Dodge Charger or Challenger SRT8, one of those high performance, whatever that thing is, and he wanted to buy a Dodge Viper. And there was one in the showroom, and he came in. He wanted to buy it, this and that, and we had all these discussions. Then at the end of it all, he said, "Oh, I got to talk to my wife before I can buy this car." And I said, "So you just came in to buy a high performance sports car, and you haven't had a discussion with your wife before you bought the car?" He goes, "Well, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Well, I understand that maybe you might have to have that conversation, but I don't think any married man in their right mind is coming in to buy a $120,000 car without having a conversation." And the thing that was really funny about it wasn't that, because he did admit he'd already had that. It was that it took him about a half an hour walking around in the showroom to make up his mind. Even though he wanted to buy the car, the numbers were right, whatever, he just couldn't wrap his head around that amount of money. It took him a while to do that. And it was kind of interesting to see it because these objections haven't changed since, probably Jesus was selling horses. But, at the end of the day, I think the thing that really separates a car person from another salesperson, from any other industry, is your ability to get ahead of that challenge, but also your ability to make it work even when it seems impossible. I think that's really the skill set of really great car people, in my opinion. I don't know what you think.
I agree with you. By the way, in reference and respect to your father, I have an interesting transition.
Okay.
My family experience, we grew up with a very fine gentleman who became tall guy who became a professional wrestler and then wound up being a municipal court judge in Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, that makes complete sense. I've never been to my fine city.
Well, my grand,
Let's reverse this for a second.
yeah,
We're focusing on the insanity of the customers, but let's not skip right over the insanity of the people working in the business.
Yep.
The illogicality of how people approach their job and what they do and how they do it. There isn't any trainer, myself included, that won't inform you that your likelihood to sell somebody who's a repeat referral is way, way higher than a stranger. Your profitability is way higher on someone you're familiar with, repeat referral. And yet, how many people still show up and wait to see if someone shows up, rather than attempting to feather their own nest, set up some kind of structure? If you think about it, that's pretty crazy too. Being at the mercy when I always tell people they have thousands and thousands of contacts they're not using because they know everybody their mother knows, their father knows, people
right.
they went to school with, people to teach their kids.
Right.
So, that's a little crazy. Everybody loves to quote Einstein that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. But I think the definition of insanity is understanding that quote and then continue to do the same thing. The people that smoked in the 20s and 30s, smoked cigarettes, I get it. Every handsome athlete, every beautiful movie star was puffing on a cigarette, and we tend to emulate people that are famous.
Yep.
We didn't know it killed us. Just some people thought it was dirty, some people didn't care. But the fact that they now know it kills you and people are still smoking. As human beings, we tend to veer towards almost insane choices, or not to understand, to not make choices, to actually make a choice. To not take a decisive action still brings a result, and certainly maybe not one that you want or need or expected.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my grandfather talking about selling cars at that time, even Duesenberg and other brands. But the one that always struck me was my first car deal. I had my manager help me with this deal. And the guy was just, as your example, was saying, I'm loyal to the other dealer and I want to go shop the number. And he goes, okay, how much is your loyalty worth? Is that $50 loyalty? Is that $100 loyalty? And I personally thought my manager was freaking insane. Like I really didn't think that a couple $100 would make a difference on a car purchase. But what shocked me, and I guess still does today, is the perception of a number and the perception of what it takes to do a deal. And I think the other thing that has served me well since then, and it's served me well in every sales job I've ever done, is sometimes you got to do things that are a little crazy. And I think that's what that whole MacGyver thing stuck out to me, is I'd see deals that I had no idea it was going to work. I had no idea that it was going to make sense. But I was willing to put in the time to make it work no matter what. And that's what got the deal done. And I think in a lot of cases, and we saw this during the pandemic, salesmen were like, oh yeah, here's the number. And, we have one. If you want it, it's this. And now they have to get back to that crazy scenario again where, less than perfect credit, they need a co-signer, whatever it might be. I mean, I remember I had a Filipino gentleman come in to buy a car, and we made a deal on the car, but he couldn't get it. He had to have his sister come in and be a co-signer. So his sister came in, and she said, oh, well, he's not buying that car. He's buying this one. And I said, well, but isn't it his car? And she goes, no, it isn't, because he needs me to co-sign, and he buys what I want, what I think makes sense for him. And I'm like, do you have other brothers? She goes, oh yeah, I got two other brothers, and it's the same scenario. They are not good at managing money. So I'm the co-signer, so I make the call. And it was just kind of hilarious. I was like, wow. And then I had the opportunity to go to Las Vegas, that King of Cars show, the actual dealership. And I was curious. And I was trying to figure out what they were actually doing there, because it was such a unique scenario. Because in Las Vegas, the mean average person lives there for less than 6 months. So they don't have a lot of repeat service business, but the sales side is quite different. And the reason is because they got to get every dollar out of that person when they're there. And it's Vegas, so it's a little bit of a freak show.
You're not going to get any fixed operations from it.
No.
Because how transitory the people are there.
No, I mean, it was a little bit nuts, but also when you're training people, and I know you get people that are new to the car business, you know what, how do you explain the car business to people? Like I train BDC people and other people, and I try to explain it to them. But how do you start that conversation with someone who says, "Hey, Larry, I love cars. I'm new to the business, or I don't love cars. I want to get into the car business." How do you explain the reality of the car business day to day to them when they don't know anything about
Reality of the car business is the big negative with the car business is the perception of us.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that's a big plus because nothing's stronger than when a negative is overcome by a positive.
Yep.
When somebody says, "Boy, I didn't think I was going to like you," or "I didn't think I was going to like that movie," or "I didn't think this was going to be a good experience," and it was great. Um, the way I explain it is, you're truly running your business within somebody else's business with no debt service. They'll provide you with the cars, with the building, with the computers, with business cards, with all the advertising. And all they want you to do is split the profit. And I always say to people, if I said to you, "Look, I'll put up $10 million and we'll split the profit," all of you would say, "Oh, that sounds great." Well, that's the deal you have in a car dealership. But you have to run it like a business. You have to understand what your time is worth, what your customer's time is worth, that the more people you bring in, the more cars you're going to sell. You want to constantly polish. You don't want to get stale. And the interesting thing is how much fun it is that, I always use the Godfather 3 analogy where Gino says, "Every time I try to get out, they drag me back in." Think how many people got into the car business over the summer while they won college, or they tried something for 2 months. 37 years later, they're still doing it. It's really, once you're in it, it's very hard. It's an addictive business because the pace and the fact that you don't make any money for 2 days, then you make a lot of money in one day, and you're always meeting new people, and every scenario, even the crazy ones, provide you something different. That it's really it's an opportunity business. It's a chance to control your income. Hey, in almost every other business, you got to go to your boss and beg for a raise. Here, you give yourself a raise. You work a little smarter and a little harder. You talk to a few more people.
it?
So you're running your business within someone else's with no debt service. You control your income. It's usually always something different. And the good, maybe the best part of it is you get exactly out of it what you put into it. Because there is no dealership in the United States or Canada where you won't find the scenario. Two salespeople are standing next to each other. One's making 150,000, the other one can't make 40. The one that's making 150 goes, "Bad, I love this place." And the guy that's going broke is, "Yeah, this place sucks." Well, maybe the thing that sucks is the thing you see in the mirror every day. Because you're not really looking at the scenario and what it is. But I mean, it's really a fun, crazy business. There's a lot of characters in it. There's a lot of excitement in it. There's always something new. And I don't know too many other businesses, where there's no cap on what you can make. That's pretty darn good. And when you throw in most places, if they're new car places, have benefits. They do a lot of work in their communities. It's nowhere near as bad as what people perceive it to be. With just as with every other field, we have a few bad people that tend to color people's perception in a negative way.
And what's your advice as when you go into a dealer, and let's just say you're hiring some new staff from them or helping them hire new staff, and they got some existing staff that maybe are underperforming? I mean, how do you advise that dealer to handle those staff that maybe could perform, but they're just not looking at the problem correctly? I mean, what's your thought there?
I think you need to sit with these people one on one. You need to understand that I don't care who you are, you're human. You need to be nurtured. Occasionally, you're going to lack confidence. Um, I'm not sure that a lot of managers, not all, but a lot of managers, have ever looked in the dictionary and looked up what a manager is. A manager is someone who manages.
Yep.
Who helps. It's funny. I'm working with the dealer to train the trainer, make the managers better trainers.
Yep.
And the first page, I show a flat tire, a car with a flat tire, and three managers in suits get ready to go to a conference. And one says to the other two, "That's a flat tire. It's only 60 miles away." Well, fine. Nobody would do that. But you and I, man, imagine how rich we'd be if we had $1 for every time we heard a manager complain about a sales day.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I remember this customer came in, they wanted to buy a van. They didn't end up buying a van, but they got a flat tire when they're backing out from the lot. And I went and I helped the guy change the tire. And my manager chewed me out. He says, the guy didn't even buy a car. I said, yeah, but he probably will. And if he's going to buy it, he's going to buy it from us because nobody else cared. And I think part of it, and the reason I got into the car business initially, was the bar was set so low. I figured I got to do better than that. Like the perception. I mean, when lawyers and politicians are the only people hated more than you, I mean, then you've got a lot of opportunity for growth there. But more importantly, when I fast forward 25 years, I think the thing that really got me interested in the car business, to your point, was you can make a good living, but also it's interesting. Like you don't see too many desk jobs where every day is chaos like it is in the car business. And I think you just learn to surf in the car business. You learn to manage the crazy. You learn to make things work that seem impossible. And I think when you're looking at someone who gets into the business and doesn't understand it, I think the best thing to do is to explain the lay of the land, but also to say, hey, there are people rightly and wrongly in a car dealership that know what they're doing and don't. But you can learn from these people who've been at it a long time, and you can do very well if you pay attention. I think the biggest challenge car salesmen have, and you hit it on the head, you got two people in the same room who doing totally different things, is listen to the customer. And you put a post up earlier today. It's like, oh, I got to follow up these leads from 5 years ago or whatever it was. And I know we've had a bunch of people on the show where it's like, okay, well, we lose 10% because we haven't emailed or whatever it is. But I think when you look at that,
you mentioned email. There's a new thing, a new invention. Some of the tech people haven't, in fact, most of the tech people haven't heard of it. That's going to revolutionize the world and make everybody richer.
Yep.
It's called a phone. Okay.
You mean one of these things, a cable to the wall? Good stuff.
And you have gotten me a lot of business. God bless you. And I love it when your people call me and go, son of a gun, you answered your phone. I said, well, of course I answered my phone. Well, Ian told us you answered your phone. We didn't believe him because nobody answered your phone.
Exactly.
In a time where AI seems to be everywhere, it's more important than ever to be human. We talk about it all the time. By the way, to relate to your story about changing the tire, there was a salesman I met when I first got into business named Leon, rest his soul.
Yeah.
Probably the most professional, organized salesperson it's ever been my pleasure to come across. He wrote everything down, and he would call his customers and say, hey, I just traded this car. It's perfect for you. Come in and buy it. And they would do it. Never saw better control because never saw anybody so tied in with his customers.
Yep.
And he took a liking. He says, man, you got a lot of energy. You're a little crazier than I am, but I love your work ethic and you seem to have a plan. But I have a bone to pick. And I really like this guy and I admired his wisdom. So what is it? He says, I'm watching you help a lot of these idiots when they're not there with their customers. So I said, let me ask you a question, Leon. Do you think a lot of these guys are going to be long-term? He says, no, they won't last. So what do you think is going to happen to their customers? And he just smiled at me and he said, now I get it, carry on. Think about how many things we do. We're like Pavlov's dog. He trained that every time the bell rung, the dog got hungry. Because that's what he correlated to.
Yeah.
Think how many people have this concept that I've got to get high CSI scores so nobody hollers if I get a little bonus, rather than saying, heck, if I keep my customers really happy, they'll come back and refer more people to me. It's the classic not seeing the forest for the trees, not understanding what you're doing, what your purpose is, and what will happen if you do things the right way. It doesn't take long to make connections.
Oh yeah.
I heard you many moons ago, you and Jeff, and I said, man, this is a cool podcast. I want to get on. And I got on. You were kind enough to invite me on. And the first podcast you ever had me on, if you recall, John Kostakis was on.
Yeah.
And John called me after the show and said, man, you are crazy. And the next thing you know, I'm in Canada doing seminars. And then I'm in Canada doing seminars with you and Jeff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think how we've cemented our relationship, which started because I took the initiative to ask you. You took the initiative to say, yeah, come on. The lesson is really simple in life. if you're married, live with somebody, if you love somebody, 1 second before you knew them, you didn't know them. And generally, men tend to think women are a pain in the neck, and women tend to think men are a pain. So if every guy on earth said, I'm not interested tonight, I'm going to watch the ball game, women said, men, they drive me, nobody ever get together. But when we're willing to suspend disbelief, when we're willing to say, maybe this will work, let me take a shot. Dan, you've asked me many a time when we're alone, wow, you seem to be really successful as a salesperson, you seem to be really successful as a recruiter and trainer. It's because I'm an optimist, possibly a dangerous optimist. But everybody that ever got out of the car, I looked at them and said, I'm selling. And the morons I work with were already figuring out why they weren't a buyer. Oh, that car's too new. That car's too old. The guy's probably wasting time. And people can see that all over your face. I always say, if you go home to somebody and you're having a bad day, then they say, what's wrong? If you do what I do, I go, no. But how do they know? Is there a neon sign over your head? Ian Nethercott's bad? No, it's all over our face. Don't you think the customer sees when we're not happy to see them and we're not enthused?
Oh, 100%.
And again, the craziness is on both sides of the fence. We behave ridiculously by not being professional, by not being friendly, by not letting the whole world know who we are, what we do, and where we do it. And a lot of customers, let's face it, there's just a huge amount of people out there that just don't make any sense. I'm not being disrespectful. It's just a fact.
Oh, yeah.
So when you combine maybe a salesperson that doesn't understand how valuable an asset each customer is, and a customer that's been to 2 or 3 places and is now so browbeaten, they're waiting to jump all over you no matter what you say. It makes for a volatile situation. That's why we're back to being empathetic, being a listener, having a little bit of a sense of humor, and being patient. I think patience has become such a neglected virtue. I mean, we get furious when our computer takes 2 extra seconds to boot up, you know? I'm sure there's going to be a shooting one day in a line at McDonald's drive-thru because somebody didn't get their French fries quick enough. You ever been one of those lines that people start honking their horns? What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Go grab Ronald McDonald and make my own French fries?
Well, there was a Chick-fil-A that opened where I live now. I think it was last weekend, not this weekend, last weekend. So I'm driving by, and there was literally a line around the block of cars to get a chicken sandwich. And I'm sitting there going, okay, but it's a chicken sandwich. Like, okay. But it was funny that you bring that up because I was at an In-N-Out Burger in California long time ago now. And what they were doing, and they have lineups the same way, they had a guy in the drive-thru pre-ordering, taking the orders. So that way when you got to the thing, it was already paid and ordered and whatever. But, you know, it's interesting because when you look at it, I used to work with 2 fleet managers. And one of these fleet managers, he'd been in the car business for a long time. He never worked weekends. So occasionally he'd have a customer show up on a weekend. So we'd call him. So this guy came in. He said, yeah, Jeff here. No, he doesn't work weekends. You know, I want to see him. I said, so I called the guy. I called Jeff, and he goes, you know, is the guy going to buy the car? I said, I don't know, dude. He's serious looking for it. He says, okay, I'll come in. So he was an avid cyclist. And you know, some of these cyclists, they think they're Italian, so they're wearing like these skin-tight outfit. So he walks in wearing this skin-tight pink leotard with cycling shoes on.
Right.
And it was not a good look, but whatever. He comes in. Guy's waiting at reception. He comes up to me and goes, are you buying the car today? He goes, no. He says, okay, when you're ready, let me know. And he turned around and he walked out. And it was interesting because 2 of the most senior people where I worked spent a lot of time what I perceived as abusing the customers, but really what they were doing is having fun with them. And I think, you know, that was a real lesson for me because I always thought you had to act in a certain way. And what I learned from that was these guys they were building a business, but they were also making it fun for the customer. And it wasn't about money at all. Like that was not what the game was about. And I think that's what we forget in the car business is it's a purchase, but it's not serious.
Every salesperson thinks it's the money thing. But if you look at any survey anywhere, money's never at the top of the list. It's how they were treated. Of course, we all know the number 1 complaint is always how long it takes.
Yeah.
How long it takes is usually because we tend to be a little unprofessional. We don't gather the information in the time of fashion. We don't get it where it goes in the time of fashion. And because we're not listening, we waste a lot of time trying to give them what we want to sell rather than what they want to buy.
Right. So what do you think? Obviously, we're going into 2025. We're going to have a prediction show next month, and we also will be at NAD. I'm going to be at the Velo booth.
Don't act like 2025 is a foregone conclusion, because half the people in the United States think the world is about to end. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I hear Ellen's leaving the country. She's leaving. Just can't handle it. And I hear Elon Musk may buy some TV channels.
Let me know if she needs a ride to the airport. That's no problem.
So what you're telling me is there's still some people that are what is it, that guy, leftist cheers? They're still crying a little bit too much. They're not sure that they're gonna.
You would not believe. We had I don't know if this is tragic comedy or just flat out tragedy. But we Laken Riley's killer was sentenced to multiple life sentences. He'll never get out.
Yeah.
And there was 2 child rapists, and if you bounce around enough, you'll see mayors in these cities saying, "Oh no, you're not taking our residents." Well, how about we take out your criminals? Would that be okay?
Well, you're letting the Menendez.
That's like a cop saying, "I don't want to arrest anybody. You know, they're all Americans, so they all live in your state."
I hear they're letting the Menendez brothers out after like 30 years or something like that. I thought that was interesting.
Well, I think they threw themselves on the mercy of the court because they're orphans.
Yeah, I don't know. I was talking to a gentleman today from Hong Kong, and he studied politics, and we talked a little bit about politics in North America. And it was interesting because I looked at it and I said, okay, well, we're moving back towards the center, which is probably a good thing. We went off the leftist crazy, including it looks like Australia is going to go back to the right as well. But the thing that was interesting, and the thing that I think is always interesting, is I watch these YouTube channels with people interviewing people from different countries. Is I go, okay, well, what's wrong with, it's not about left, it's not about right, it's about common sense. To me, that's really what it's about. And I think we've just become uncommonly stupid. And that's why we need to go back. Because we can no longer continue to fund the dumb. And I think that's the challenge as we run into it. And when you're dealing with people in the car business or even customers, it's not about left or right. It's about what makes sense for them, what makes sense for the dealer.
Ian, you need to throw in the Margaret Thatcher quote. They asked her about socialism. She says it's great you run out of everybody else's money.
Oh yeah, Thatcher was no joke. Definitely no joke. I mean, I think about that a lot recently, and we have a fool in charge in this country, but this has got to be the dumbest political ploy I've ever heard of. Is what he's planning for Christmas. So he said, "Okay, nobody likes me. I got to run again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a 30-day tax break on some things, and I'm going to cut you a check. And you should believe that that's because I care." So I was like, okay, so you're bribing us with your money, and you think that's going to get you reelected? I was like, wow.
We see scary things sometimes, and because not everybody's paying attention, we don't realize how scary it was. When they had the trucker strike, and he threatened to freeze their bank accounts. When a country which is considered to be a free country handles dissent like you're in Cuba or in the Soviet Union, you know, we're making a huge mistake. We have people in our country that bought into, you know, that Trump was in the pocket of Putin, and then buried news on the laptop with Hunter. I mean, how come none of these people are arrested? How come none of these people? I mean, if it's to fix an election, to perform treason, you know, look what's going over our border. If you have a relative who's, God forbid, killed or injured or raped, how do you justify that we allow people in that don't make any sense? And you know, we can look. You can debate things like abortion, depending on if you're Catholic, Jew, whatever you're. But when you see things that just make no sense, that question the sovereignty of a country and the safety of its citizens, what do you do? But listen, it all dials into the theme of your show. A huge amount of people aren't paying attention. A lot of people are a little mentally damaged, and that makes for a really, really interesting yet scary world.
Yep.
It makes our field so interesting and fun because, you know, every once in a while you meet somebody and boy, they become a friend for life and they become a loyal customer. And every once in a while you think, man, did this guy or lady just get up in the morning and think, how ignorant, stupid, and miserable can I be? Or was it just natural reflex, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was laughing as we get into Thanksgiving weekend in the U.S. and there's all these people going, oh, I'm gonna have to get out the baseball bat and beat up my relatives and all this stuff. And Black Friday, which is coming up, I guess, on Thursday or Friday this week. But the thing that is really interesting to me is just, and this I guess came out when I lived in the U.S. I worked in an office, and half the staff was on one side, half the staff was on the other side. And I used to say to them, I said, well, like, have you any understanding of the issues, like left or right, Republican, Democrat in Canada, liberal, conservative, doesn't matter. What is that person going to do for you to make your life better? I'm not saying they're magically going to get it done, but what shocked me was their lack of basic understanding of the issues at hand. I mean, and this played out in the U.S. You had the number one issue on the left was abortion, which was not at all what people cared about. I mean, they played it out, but it didn't make sense. And it proved a simple thing. You spend $1 billion on bad ideas, it's still not sellable. Like, it was crazy.
Wait a minute. But think about the lack of clarity, because a lot of the people, it veered more left than right. A lot of the liberals said people have autonomy over their body until they made them take a vaccine that a lot of people didn't think they needed, or went against their religious persuasion.
Yeah. Anyway, we're out of time today, but thanks, Larry. Lots of crazy stories. If you are going to be in New Orleans for NADA 2025, I'll be at the Velo booth. I'm going to be putting up some scheduling soon. Larry will be around, as will my wife. And in terms of next month, we're going to be doing our prediction show that we do every year, and obviously a holiday show. And thanks again, Larry, for your sponsorship.
Hey, Ian, one final comment. I did take note that when you have a tech show, you bring in brilliant people like Tim Hayden. And when you had the crazy show, you invited Dick.
Yeah, well, it's nothing wrong with crazy. There's that, what is it, that movie, The Gods Are Crazy? That was this weird hit.
The gods must be
crazy. It was something about a Coca-Cola. That's all I remember. But it was
great. The guy found the bottle.
Yeah, it was a crazy movie. But I think that's something we definitely need as we roll into 2025. People that have less of a judgmental, more of a sense of humor.
Why don't we wish everybody a happy and healthy Thanksgiving?
Absolutely. Thanksgiving, people obviously don't get crazy on Black Friday. Definitely take the time to spend with friends and family. And of course, if we can help, obviously reach out. Larry from Career Changers USA, thanks for your sponsorship again for 2025. And VidCalls will be launching our multi-language piece soon, so stay tuned for that. And if you're going to be at NADA, definitely come by. Happy to do an interview and love to connect as well. Thanks for having the time today, and have yourself a great week. Don't eat too much turkey or whatever it is you eat. Ciao.